Howdy folks, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I am your host, the Mighty Bjorn, and today for you I have a new Skies Vase Combat video. Going to be talking about fighter generations here today, mostly because it comes up in my various videos that I make. It normally comes up at least once about what generation the fighter is. And understand that fighter generations haven't always been broken down, but for this video I'm going to focus on using Richard P. Hollian's proposals for the classifications for the different fighter jets. Now at the time, in 1990, he would actually break down everything into 6 different generations. Now since then, that's been expanded upon with the adaptation of the 6th generation. Now the criteria for the various generations isn't fully agreed upon, but for the purpose of the video, I will be using Richard Hollian's breakdown of the different generations of jet fighters. So let's begin here, shall we? Let's talk about Generation 1. This is the first generation, obviously. This is the generation that would actually start appearing towards the end of World War II with planes like the Me-262. These early fighters wouldn't be far removed actually from their piston-driven counterparts. These fighters typically had straight wings, were constructed out of wood or lightweight alloys. The primary armament at the time would be typically machine guns or autocannons. Some could also mount bombs and rockets too, but understand that this stuff was not guided munitions like we have now. They typically would have little to no avionics, not even radar. Now, mounting radar on aircraft was not a completely new thing, but it was still a fairly new concept at the time, and avionics was not used for guiding weapons whatsoever. There was no targeting computers or anything like that. You just pretty much had to do it from trial and error. Now, to give you a couple examples here of jet fighters of the time, you have the DH-115 Vampire as part of Generation 1. You have the F-86 Sabre. Now this is a Korean War fighter, but this would follow the Generation 1 style fighter planes. Of course, then you have the Me-262, which probably the earliest mass production plane, jet fighter if you will, even though there is some other jet fighters in there. You also get the MiG-15, which is also another Korean War era plane. This would follow World War II. And then you'd actually have the P-80 Panther. Now that being said, even though this wouldn't appear till after World War II, the design and testing process for this plane actually was during World War II. But basically, your World War II early Korean War generation period fighters would make up your Generation 1 fighter aircraft. Generation 2 jet fighters would begin appearing around the world at the time of the Korean War. The new fighters could achieve even higher speeds than previous generation. However, guns proved unsatisfactory in performance due to the increased speed. Radar was also tied to the new upcoming weapon systems. You would start seeing weapon systems such as radar-guided and infrared homing missiles, which also generally improved accuracy and firepower. Not really too much there for the Generation 2 aircraft. It's not like they were a light year separated from their Generation 1 counterparts. And that being said, there were still a lot of Generation 1 style aircraft that was primarily used during the Korean War. For a few examples of Generation 2 aircraft, you would get the F-100 Super Sabre, the F-104, which actually is an Ace Combat, the F-105 Thunder Chief, the MiG-21. Sorry, I'm old and shit. That's a MiG-21. If I wasn't old and shit, giving you the best information I can with the lowest budget possible. And then, of course, you have the French Mirage 3. Now undo third generation fighters, which was a more multi-role focused aircraft, is generally what the third generation was. They were designed to carry a wide variety of ordnance. The new fighters also had pulse Doppler radar, off-site targeting, and terrain warning systems. Imagine trying to fly aircraft before there was such thing as a terrain warning system, especially in a dogfight, and you lose track of where the ground is. Yeah, that'd be a bad day. Generation 3 fighters would also feature turbofan engines. These were the first fighters to feature the more modern turbofan style engines, which we actually still use those today. They're actually really superb for what they do. Now, that being said, the engines that we have now are vastly improved over the Generation 3 turbofan engines. These engines also performed increased maneuverability as well as extended sortie times. Now, just to give you a couple examples here. Of course, you have the F-4 Phantom, which is also actually an ace combat. It's actually one of my favorite planes to fly, at least for shits and giggles. It's not actually really good. Then, of course, you get the F-5 Tiger or Tiger Shark. I've heard it just called Tiger, but I've also heard it called Tiger Shark. A little confused there. You also have the Harrier, which is no longer in service. They've pretty much all been removed. Now, these were VTOL capable plane, which is not actually extremely common, but they are out there. The Soviets even have a few VTOL capable aircraft. Of course, then you have the MiG-23, and then the Su-22, which actually derived from the Su-17, which is also part of Generation 3 aircraft. Now on to Generation 4. Following the mixed success of Generation 3 fighters, Generation 4 fighters would return to its more specialized designs and roles. However, these new fighters, well, more focused on being fighters for the most part, would also have multi-role type capabilities, ground attack capabilities, or at least provisions and features that would allow these fighters to fulfill those other roles. But at the end of the day, they were still primarily focused on one set role, such as the A-10 Warthog or even the F-15C, where the F-15C is a tactical fighter. It's meant to do pretty much nothing but fighting. Actually, it can't even, from what I understand of the F-15C versus the E, the F-15C actually can't deliver laser-guided munitions. And it's apparently not very friendly to use with unguided munitions as well, which is why you get the F-15E in there. But Generation 4 fighters were developed with fly-by-wire technology. Now, some of them, especially the earlier ones, such as the F-15 and the F-14, and even the early, very early F-16s, they would feature a hybrid system of electrical and mechanical, or analog, if you will, for its control systems. However, full fly-by-wire technology was definitely in the works, and you would see that with some of the later Generation 4 fighters, as well as some of the early Generation 4 fighters that were hybrid systems would later be upgraded to be fully digital control. They were also designed with composite materials. Increased maneuverability was also in mind, as well as the advanced avionics, and some designs would even feature stealth capabilities. A few examples here. We have the F-14 Tomcat, because Tomcats, dude, the F-14 Tomcat, so cool. The F-15 Eagle, the F-16 Falcon, the F-117 Nighthawk, which would be the earliest stealth fighter. Of course, then you have the original bad guy plane with the MiG-29. And then, of course, you also have the Su-27 in this generation of fighter aircraft. Now on to Generation 4.5, and mostly in general terms, this is very generalized terms. Generation 4.5 fighters are Generation 4 fighters that have been upgraded over time, or are brand new fighters that have been designed with the newest technology that was actually developed from for fifth generation fighters. Many of these fighters would have even further improved radar, either with canards or thrust vectoring, improved radar, reduced radar signature, high capability digital communications, and improved digital controls. Now, for just a few examples of Generation 4.5 aircraft, one would be the F-15 Active. As you can see here, it's got canards and it's got thrust vectoring, the thrust vectoring engines. But that being said, from what I understand, this hasn't gone into production, but it kind of looks like a lot of the technology that was used on the F-15 Active may end up on the F-15 anyway. But that's another video for another day. You also get the F-18 Block 3, the French Rafale, the Saab Gripen, the Su-37 Terminator would have been a Generation 4.5 if it had entered service, which it didn't. But once again, a lot of the technology from this technology demonstrator ended up in other Russian planes, including the Su-30. Sorry, Su-30. And then, of course, you have the Eurofighter 2000, aka the Typhoon. The next generation of fighters I'm going to cover here is going to be the 5th generation fighters, which is the newest generation currently in active service. Many of these fighters would begin development in the 1990s, and some of them would start entering service in the early 2000s. This generation would take advance of more advanced materials, control systems, and the improvements to stealth technology that have been made since the F-117 entered service. And actually, stealth technology is one of the hallmarks of 5th generation fighters. These fighters would also take advantage of the new C3 technology, which is command, control, and communications systems. And a lot of them would also feature link-ups for the new smart helmet tech. I'm not fully sure of the smart helmet tech, to be honest. I'm vaguely familiar, but I'm not really fully familiar with everything the smart helmet can do. While some Generation 4 fighters would take advantage of some of these technologies, all of these technologies are the hallmark of a 5th generation fighter. And of course, fighters of this generation, which we're probably pretty mostly familiar with at this point, is the F-22 Raptor, Fat Amy, the good old F-35. You have the J-20 Mighty Dragon, which is actually what I'm flying in this video clip. And then the Su-57 for the bad guys. Now, this part here, I'm going to talk a little bit about the 6th generation fighters. That being said, there's not really a whole lot to talk about, because right now with the 6th generation of fighters, it's more or less mostly stipulation, if you will, of what the next generation of fighters is going to feature. Now, of course, they're going to see improvements over the 5th generation of fighters, and if anything, the next generation is going to greatly enhance what the 5th generation currently has in service. Now, many of these fighters are still in the design and prototype phase, if you will, but that being said, it sounds like the earliest fifth generation fighter, which may be the FA-XX, is actually going to see or be unveiled in 2025 with hopeful adoption by 2030. Now, that being said, too, there's also expectations or stipulations, if you will, that there's going to be some kind of modular system with the fighters themselves and the airframe. Apparently, they're talking about making it easier to do things like add canards as well as pylons. But that one I'm not 100% sure of. As I said, it's really speculation, if you will. But a couple sixth generation fighters that are currently in the prototype phase. This one here is the FA-XX program. And then, of course, you have the BAE Systems Tempest, which honestly kind of looks like a cross between Fat Amy and an F-22, but that's none of my business. Either way, folks, that's going to be my video on fighter generations. Hopefully y'all enjoyed it, learned something a bit out of this, and things of that nature. Anyway, folks, do me a favor, share this video around, like it, subscribe. Comment down below what you think of the different variations. What's your favorite jet fighter? I mean, I'm really torn because I'm between like the F-14 and I think the F-18 is really cool. And then, of course, the A-10 is, you know, it's the Warthog. I want to say it's the A-10 with probably the F-14 being a really, really close second. But anyway, folks, like I said, hopefully you all enjoyed this video. Thank you very much for tuning in, and have yourself a wonderful day.